So this is Steve Garson, my business partner, and the geophysics expert in our company, and he's actually running the GPR at the site in earlier July. So then what we did was, once we got the results back, we were able to put, basically geo-reference the mapping, geo-reference the area itself. So we use, in order to make sure that we know exactly where we are, because high precision accuracy is really, really important. If we don't know where we are on the surface, we can tell you that there are things underground. But in cases like burials, you want to know exactly where those things are under the ground surface. So we need to make sure that we anchor our grid in a highly accurate way. And we do that by using, it's like a GPS, but if you have a handheld GPS, I don't know if you know that the margin of error can be as much as 10 meters. That's fine if you're just trying to find your car, or if you're going geocaching, or you need to be in a general area somewhere. Perfectly acceptable to be 10 meters off one way or another. But in doing this kind of work, 10 meters, we'd be over in another plot. So we use what is called a global navigation satellite system, which is a really, really high-powered GPS. Almost like a total station, but much, actually even more accurate. And we anchor each corner of the grid with the GNSS, and that allows us to know where we are within sub-millimeter accuracy. So it's really, really accurate data collection. And the tools that we have at our disposal today that allow us to do this kind of archaeological work and this kind of investigation has just rapidly accelerated in the last decade or so. It's actually hard to keep up with it all. But here, so we geo-referenced the map that Pam gave us. We have our coordinates within sub-millimeter accuracy, and then we overlaid the GPR data onto that yellow square that I showed you where our grid actually was, and that's what it looks like. So you can see already there's stuff happening. So this is one of the plan views that I told you about. So we're looking straight down on what we're seeing. And what the GPR is able to do is actually not just show you one picture of what it looks like below the ground surface. It generates images in increments. So if we go down 50 centimeters, we can look at what is below surface at 50 centimeters, and then we can discard that layer and see what's 100 centimeters or a meter below surface. We can even do it in smaller increments than that. But it allows you to literally peel back the layers of soil that has developed over time and really get a good look at what's underneath. So we're not just looking at, when I show you some of this data, it's very specific areas within that grid. So this is one of the plan views, and you can see on the side there the depth is 50 centimeters below surface. So we're looking at what's underneath the ground, 50 centimeters below. And what we did was we took the existing headstones that were standing, Leander, Messenger, there's another Messenger spelled differently, Edith is her first name, I don't know why we didn't put her last name in, but Edith. And then there's another small, or another headstone to the left-hand corner there, which would be the northwest corner of the property. So we knew that there were headstones in the vicinity. What we assumed when we started this investigation, that just based on general Christian burial practices, that those people would have been buried facing east. What was interesting and what surprised me was that the headstones themselves, the inscriptions on the headstones, are looking towards us. So normally when I'm in a cemetery and I'm looking at a headstone, I had the assumption that if I'm reading, that the person is in front of the headstone. but that clearly cannot be the case in the old Tremont Cemetery if in fact people were buried facing east, which means that we're looking at the existing headstones as we would be if we were standing at the plot. The inscriptions are in front of us so that we can read them, but the burials are behind the headstones. So that's the assumption that we're going to start with, for lack of any other additional information to suggest otherwise. You can already see on the plan view that at 50 centimeters below surface, there's some significant responses. There are what we use the term anomaly. There are some significant anomalies that are starting to show up, even 50 centimeters down. Particularly on the right-hand side, so this is turned over, so we're facing west, we're facing east, and north is at this end here. But you can see over on the southern side of the plot that there are, in particular, quite high responses. So the brighter the colors, in particular the red, the more the GPR is picking up something that is completely different from everything around it. So these are more of the plan view results. And the first one on the left-hand side, you can see there are really three groups or three sets of anomalies that begin to show up. That one, I think, is 85 centimeters below surface, the first one, but there's lots of really strong anomalies. And then we just isolated those anomalies so that you could see them better. So I think it's about 90 centimeters. The second one over is about 90 centimeters below surface, and you can see near the Leander, the existing Leander headstone, there's another large anomaly that's showing up. Same thing a few centimeters below. They actually all start about 50 centimeters below surface, and they are consistent. There are consistent anomalies that go down at least a meter in depth. So we have one that is sitting just in front of the Messenger burial, and then another one in front of Messenger and Edith. So we're definitely seeing some anomalies. What I worried, and I'm still a little bit concerned about, is when you look at the patterns of those anomalies that are showing up, they're remarkably consistent with the existing headstones. Which made me wonder, is it possible that those burials that are supposed to be facing east were actually buried in front of the headstones so that you could read the inscriptions, and you would be standing facing the inscription and facing the burial itself? Is that a possibility? It's certainly intriguing that the anomalies that we are showing are really, really lining up remarkably well with those existing headstones. It doesn't mean that's the case. It could very well be that there are other burials in that area that have no association, but that when they were buried, there was a very set pattern or alignment of where burials should go. So if the existing headstones were still there and they were using this new plot to bury poor and sick people, they could have used the existing headstones to sort of dictate where they're going to go in that particular plot. So we have two scenarios right now that we could work with. One, those anomalies, which I'm fairly confident in saying they represent burials, are associated with the existing headstones or with unmarked burials, but done in the same sort of time frame as the other burials, and so they're in alignment as one, potentially could expect. Right, so the next one is, this is what we refer to as a profile view. Profiles are really, really interesting. So if you could just imagine, you're standing in front of those existing headstones, and by some magic, you're able to sink yourself below the ground surface, so that your head is touching the surface of the ground, and the rest of you is below the ground surface. And then you can open your eyes, and you can see. You can see what's in front of you underneath the ground. That's what the profile view represents. So you are now looking at a cross-section of what we're seeing below the ground surface. And like I said, it looks like, I don't know if it's a EKG or it's like, there's some sort of medical test that you can get that kind of look like this. And it can be difficult to interpret. And that probably looks nothing but old black and white TV static. But it's actually jam-packed with information. So the first thing that we noticed was there appeared to be two separate, temporally discrete events. And what I mean by that is that there's 2 points in time in the past where that plot has been significantly modified. And they've left their own separate traces. So, okay, I'll speed up a little bit. Okay, so there are, so at the top one, which is in yellow, it's only about 50 centimeters. So at the very top, that's the ground surface that we're walking on. About 50 centimeters between that and 50 centimeters down, it looks like it's fill. It looks like somebody came in and threw down a whole bunch of soil in order to level that particular area of the cemetery. It's possible, subsequent to that event, that there were other burials placed there, particularly if there were cremation burials and that sort of thing. And we do see some noise in the top 50 centimeters. So I don't know if you can see there's some really sort of pronounced lines going across in the yellow box. Probably don't represent burials. There could be just some rock in the fill. There could be a number of scenarios for why the GPR is picking up anomalies there, but it's clearly different from what lies beneath that. The next thing we noticed was that from 50 centimeters down to about, I'd say 1.5 meters, there's another really clear group of anomalies. The top of that section, you can see, I wish I had my pointer, but you can see there's a very clear line that kind of runs right across the top, right underneath the red line. We believe that is the previous ground surface. So that's when they were burying potentially people in this plot. They were actually walking on the surface below, obviously, the fill that was added later. But that's about 50 centimeters below surface. And the compaction of walking across that surface year after year after year, decade after decade, actually is detectable by the GPR. We think that's the original ground surface of this area, covered by 50 centimeters of landscape fill. And it's weird, because when you go to the plot itself, you'll notice, and maybe you'll see it tonight, but you'll notice that there's actually like a little bank, like a landscape bank, clearly modified by human beings. And it's on top of the bank that the existing headstones sit. In any case, when we look more closely, we actually see three different groups of anomalies that we fairly certain represent unmarked burials. Again, I can't say if they're associated with the existing headstones or if we're looking at unmarked burials previously unidentified.